Welcome back to Crash Test Hockey, where I talk all things NHL. Now, before I dive into this, I just want to ask, if you happen to be new to the channel, please smash that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Now, we're going to talk about Metro Division trade targets here. And I'm just going to glare over the top 4 teams in that division. Carolina, New York, Pittsburgh, and Washington. Starting with Carolina, they've got some UFAs here that they're going to sign afterwards. Anita Ryder and Trocheck. Derek Stefan. It'll be interesting to see what they do with those guys. Ian Cole is another one. Moving on to the Rangers, there's only one guy here of note, really, which is Ryan Strome. With the Pittsburgh Penguins, there's a plethora of players, of course. You know who? Malkin, Letang. We've got Brian Rust as well. Evan Rodrigues, an interesting one because he's having a breakout year at age 28 there. He can move up and down the lineup and looks like he's going to at least score 20 goals this season. And yeah, that's about it. Maybe Casey DeSmith, you can throw him in there too. Lastly, the Washington Capitals. It's only really Justin Schultz and Matt Irwin. There's no one else really. And Michael Kempfy. Of course, we'll see if he works his way back into the lineup sometime soon. Anyways, so let's begin with the Columbus Blue Jackets here, who sit in 5th spot of the Metro, and the playoff picture looks pretty clear, right? So Columbus, trade targets could be starting with Max Domi, who's currently on the 3rd line, left wing there. He's going to be a UFA. He's coming off a $5.3 million contract. He's 26 years old. Of course, he's had a bit of a disappointing time with Columbus. I could see him being moved closer to the deadline because of his higher cap hit for a guy most contenders would put on their 3rd line, maybe their 2nd line. Then there's Patrick Laine, who is an RFA with arbitration rights. He's coming off a $7.5 million contract. He's 23 years old. He's having a disappointing time in Columbus overall, really, but I think we all know this guy has the potential to easily get back to 30, 40 plus goals. But I think with the size of this contract, this is a deal, if Columbus doesn't re-sign him, that will be done during the offseason. On defense, we got Dean Cookin, who's a right-shot depth defender. He's a UFA. Only played 11 games so far this year, though, but he's coming off a $1.65 million contract. He's 28 years old, a nice depth option for someone. And goaltender Corpiasalo, he'll be a UFA coming off a $2.8 million cap hit at 27 years old. He's not having the greatest season. In 17 games, he's at .886 save percentage right now. Maybe that'd be good for Edmonton starter, perhaps. I'm joking, relax. But really, as a 3rd string goalie somewhere, maybe that could, if Columbus would eat some of his salary too, I'm sure he could go. Moving on to the next club here, let's talk about the Islanders, who I had such high hopes for, and I think everyone did, especially before the beginning of the season started. I looked at them as a top 6, 7 team in the league, and it's all kind of imploded. But I definitely think this team could bounce back next season. I think the mountain's just a little bit too high for them to climb right now. Let's start with Cal Clutterbuck, who's the 4th liner there. He hits a ton. He's usually in the top 5 of the league in that department. Problem is, he's a UFA that's coming off a $3.5 million contract, and he's 34. For like a 3rd or 4th line guy, maybe the money is a little high there, but again, it's workable. Lamoriello, on the other hand, may want your 2nd child. Zach Parise, maybe a taxi squad guy you could use, a nice veteran. He's $750,000. He's cheap, 37 years old. Let's moving on to the defense. Chara, of course, is one of the big ones, literally and figuratively here. He's a UFA, only making $750. He's 44 years old. He can still play bottom pairing minutes and play the PK pretty effectively. His leadership, of course, is unmatched. If he wants to go anywhere, I'm sure teams would love to have him. He's a left shot, if you didn't know that already. Then there's Andy Green, who I think is a left shot, but he plays both left and right on D. He's also only $750,000. He's 39 years old. Again, another depth guy, maybe a taxi squad candidate. Then there's Scott Mayfield, who does have an extra year attached to his contract, but he's only making $1.45 million. He's 29 years old. He's been playing first pairing minutes for quite some time because of the injuries on the island, and he's averaging just over 20 minutes a night. And he does a bit of everything. Hits, blocks shots, puts up a little bit of points here and there. But I know a lot of teams would probably love to have him, especially at that price. It's how much would Lamoriello want? That's my phone ringing. It's my wife calling. But I'm going to keep going here. Now, then lastly here, there's Var Lamoff, the goaltender for the Islanders. Again, he's got one extra year left on his contract at $5 million. He's 33 in 13 games this season. He's got a .915 save percentage. Not bad. And I know there's a bit of an asterisk here because, well, Islanders play a really solid defensive game. Maybe that kind of masks some of the numbers when it comes to the goalies. But still, I think he'd be a worthwhile pickup, maybe a more attractive one for Edmonton there especially. Let's move on. Let's talk about Philly, who are in second last in the Metro right now, and everything has just gone wrong there this season. Fletcher tried to, make some Band-Aid moves. He brought in Ristolainen and Ellis, and, through injuries and COVID, just nothing has worked out. The coach has been fired. You know the story, right? So let's start with the big one, the big fish here in Claude Drew. Now, I believe he's got a no trade, so he's not going anywhere unless he wants to. But man, would he be a great land for any team in their top six. He can also play center besides wing, of course, but he's coming off an $8.275 million contract. The 34-year-old has played 41 games this season, 15 goals, 35 points. Pretty impressive. There would probably have to be a third team involved here to eat up some of his cap, and or he would be moved, last minute in order to reduce the cost. My wife is persistent. That's what that buzzing noise is, if you can hear it. And then next, there's Derek Brassard here, who's kind of a sneaky ad for any team, really. He's a UFA. He's only making $825,000. He's 34 in 19 games, has 4 goals, 11 points. He's a +7 in Philly. And he's fit in quite nicely, moving up and down the lineup through injuries, playing center, but he can also easily play wing. I think he'd be an attractive grab. And then starting with defense, Ristolainen is the shiny toy here. A lot of teams would covet, right? Right shot defenseman, UFA, coming off a $5.4 million contract. He's 27 in 40 games this season, 2 goals, 11 points, -12. Although you could say a lot of players on Philly are in the minus category right now. But he could definitely be a grab. Again, maybe a last-minute ad because of the size of his contract. And this is where the next player becomes maybe even a bit more attractive than him because of what he makes and what he does. And Justin Braun. Now, he's a right shot, kind of stay-at-home defenseman, coming off a $1.8 million contract. He's 34, averages just under 20 minutes a night. He's been playing top pairing, with Provorov. And he's a +2 on Philly. So this would be a nice, cheap, safe top 4 ad for like a defensive shutdown pair for any contender without much salary cap space. And then finally here, let's talk about Martin Jones, the goaltender, who's going to be a UFA. He's making $2 million. He's 32 years old. He's actually had a bit of a bounce back year with Philly now. He's been awful, really, the past few seasons. He's got a .901 so far this season, but he started off on fire. And if, a club is looking for a third stringer, this could be it. Lastly, let's talk about the New Jersey Devils. Not a lot of UFAs here, ironically. The Devils didn't really set themselves up to be sellers this season, surprisingly enough. But let's talk about a few guys I have here, starting with Andreas Johnson, who's a winger who's got an extra year attached to his contract after this season at $3.4 million. He's 27 years old, and he's on pace to score 20 goals this season. Maybe the contract might be a bit of an issue, but you think that could be worked out. And then on defense, there's PK Subban, who I don't think anyone's going to go near, really. He is a UFA, but it's a $9 million contract. Even if he were to go right at the trade deadline, they might need a third team involved for this. And for a third pairing D, who's not especially defensively responsible. I mean, he's 32 in 40 games this season. Has got 2 goals, 15 points. He's a -1. I see this more as him signing with the club for, near the minimum next season, around $1 million or something. And lastly, there's Damon Severson, who's another right shot D, who's got an extra year on his contract as well, at $4.1 million plus. He hasn't had a last couple of good past games, but he's 27 years old. He's played 41 games this year, playing top 4 minutes, 6 goals, 21 points, can play the power play or the penalty kill. He's a -12. And last night against Toronto, he didn't look good, defensively speaking. But that's what they have to offer, and I've heard his name being bandied about in the rumor mill. That's it. That's all. I'd love to hear from you and who you think might be in the rumor mill from your favorite team, or which one of the guys I mentioned you think might be going to a certain club, down in the comments section below. If you want to support my channel, you can do that through my crowdfunding site and buy me a coffee, which you'll find a link to in the description box. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, which will alert you when my next video comes out. And hey, in this crazy COVID multiverse we're living in right now, be kind to each other.